Now let's begin in the Zambian capital, Lusaka, a city that is estimated to be growing at more than 4% a year, often with little planning. Its slums and even parts of the city itself are regularly inundated, swamped by muddy water, floating rubbish and impassable roads. According to the experts, the first step to solving the problem of rapid urbanization is getting accurate geospatial data. In other words, to properly map the city. Official maps of the city are out of date and there are very few surveyors, so the government urgently needs a more accurate and up-to-date map of Lusaka for the provision of infrastructure and utilities. And that's where Ordnance Survey, the UK's mapping agency, comes in. In collaboration with the Zambian government, the agency is pioneering a solution to solving urbanization problems in Lusaka, preparing to test a new way of managing urban development thanks to artificial intelligence. AI is helping to not only chart the city's drains, but also to locate key infrastructure for urban planning and disaster reduction. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by one of the people who's overseeing the Zambian project, the Regional Director of African Ordnance Survey, Andy Wilson. Mr. Wilson, thank you very much indeed for joining us. First of all, just set out for us the problems of rapid urbanization, that many African countries such as Lusaka, Zambia, are facing. I mean, what happens when a city grows too quickly?
So thank you very much for having me on this afternoon. I really appreciate it. What comes with the mass movement of people from the rural area to the urban area is real pressure on public services in that city. So access to clean drinking water, sanitation, transportation. It's the everyday things really that people need to function in a city. And I think the challenge therefore is that without a detailed map and understanding of where citizens live, it's very difficult to plan for those key public infrastructure services. So by bringing this rapid mapping technology, we're able to try and help solve that problem. So how to spot the gaps in that critical infrastructure. So where are the gaps in drinking water? Where are the gaps in sanitation and other critical services such as health facilities, so that the informal nature of the settlements becomes less informal over time?
Well, thanks for setting that out. And now that you're talking about it, tell us more about that pilot project that you're working on in the Zambian capital. I mean, I understand that Lusaka is a city that's struggling to keep its infrastructure abreast of rapid population growth.
Indeed. So, I mean, what we've done here is we've brought the latest state-of-the-art artificial intelligence technologies for mapping. So, for many countries and nations, creating large digital maps is very challenging in that it takes a very long time. It can take many months, if not years, to actually capture that detail that's required. So we're using artificial intelligence machines to actually trace the buildings, the roads, all of the things you can see in the real world from, in this case, aerial images of Zambia. And we're very delighted and honoured to have worked with the Zambian Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, who had access to those aerial images. And so what we've done is we've taken those images and used the machines to trace off every individual map feature so that we can create that very detailed map of the city of Lusaka to now in turn help solve these problems that you've mentioned.
So basically, let me just understand this. I'm a bit of a technophobe there. I mean, you basically get aerial images, not like satellite images, but real pictures, I'm assuming, of Lusaka. Then you use artificial intelligence to generate highly detailed maps across hundreds of kilometers. I mean, that sounds absolutely fascinating. Just tell us more about how the technology actually works and if I am on the right track.
No, you're on the right track, and yes, we can use either satellite images or we can use high resolution aerial images taken from an aircraft. And as you say, it's that ability for our computers, and what we do is we train our computers to actually understand what different things look like on that image, so they can determine what a house looks like, they can see what a road looks like, they can even classify the land use as well. So we have very clever technology and machines that can learn about what the real world looks like and then translate that into tracing it from these images that we use. So it means that for a city the size of Lusaka, we've mapped 420 square kilometers in a matter of weeks. That's a process that would have normally taken many months to do. So it's that very quick access and rapidity of access to this mapping that's making a real difference.
Well, I mean, I'm wondering, I know broadly what the, the advantage to what you're doing is, but I'm wondering what the end benefit is for a country like Zambia. I mean, a country that at the best of times is quite poor and has difficulty getting a hold of the money to actually do the kinds of jobs that your map would make possible for them. In other words, even if you gave them the map, which you're clearly intending to do, I mean, they'd have to be able to afford to put the infrastructure there.
Well, the good news is that Zambia already has a good spatial, what we call a spatial data infrastructure. So the ability to actually store that map and make it available to other parts of the Zambian government. That's the key here, because this map can now be used for a whole range of other priorities and policies in Zambia. So not just looking at informal settlements and the gaps in public infrastructure, but this map can now be used for all sorts of things for public good and social economic benefits. So by having that good single map view that can connect all the different stakeholders in government of Zambia together, they can bring together the evidence that they have in one place, which means that decisions about transportation, about emergency response, about health facilities, even in the planning of the census, which is coming up, having that individual household view of mapping will be immensely valuable in the planning and the analysis of sensitive information, also in the context of land, tenure and exchange, and really any emergency event that needs a combined response from different responders, the ability to plan, respond and recover to any emergency event such as flood or even managing a COVID pandemic. The map comes into its own and becomes that critical component to make the best decisions.
Yes, I think I've got it. So basically, as more shanty towns are springing up, because of course more people are moving to the cities, in spite of however good the infrastructure is, I mean, it's putting a big strain, making it much harder for that infrastructure to cope with a growing population. And in point of fact, the official maps are out of date in Zambia.
So, I mean, this process helps those maps become more immediate and more up to date. So that's the good thing, that this process, because it's so quick, it enables that ongoing updating of those maps, which means that decision makers have the most recent information at their fingertips to make those best decisions. So in terms of planning that infrastructure that's required for any burgeoning urban population, it's essential that any country or city looks at this as I think a critical component. And I think many governments across the world now are recognizing that map data is that critical part of their infrastructure. You know, without that foundational view of the landscape, the ability to understand individual buildings and individual citizen positions and how they live and move around cities, you can't make those decisions from an informed basis. So what this does is it brings the best evidence to the fingertips of the stakeholders to make the best decisions, and in turn create the most efficient public services, which in turn of course saves money and drives benefit and socio-economic growth in that nation.
But of course, I was reading your release there. This is a pilot scheme, is it? So it's still being tested?
So it's an initial piece of work we're doing in Lusaka, but the results have been fantastic, and now we are exploring how we can now scale this out, not just in Zambia, but we're also open to, work with any country that has this challenge. So we are actively looking for partnerships with countries that would want to solve this problem. So what we have here is the foundation of a really good way of helping these countries rapidly map their detail environment at a very rapid level and expediency to get that to them.
Okay, please stay with us. We want to talk with you a bit more. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about how artificial intelligence is helping to find a solution to the problem of rapid urbanization in Africa. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu, and today we are looking at Lusaka, Zambia's capital and rapidly expanding commercial hub. But we may as well be in Lagos, Nigeria, or any other African city that's growing too quickly. We're exploring a pioneering mapping project that's combining the aerial photography skills of the Zambian authorities with the artificial intelligence mapping expertise of Britain's mapping agency, known as Ordnance Survey. Data that is so crucial in a rapidly urbanizing African city. The issue of rapid urbanization has become an existential issue across Africa, where tens of thousands, even millions of people settle in claustrophobically tight areas, often building their own housing in whatever little space they can find. This is the story of Africa, urbanizing at breakneck speed, but with little planning. And that's where the cartographers come in to map the area and keep track of where everything is or ought to be, armed with artificial intelligence. And Andy Wilson, Regional Director of Africa Ordnance Survey, a British mapping project that's running a pilot in Lusaka, is still with me via WebEx. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. And you were just telling us before we went on break how things are going in Lusaka, Zambia with that project. I mean, what stage is it at presently?
So yeah, thank you, Charles. So the stage is that we've completed the first 420 square kilometres of Lusaka. The map has been completed in a matter of weeks. We're currently in the process of working with the Zambian government, so both the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources and the Ministry of Local Government, and working with our partner here in the UK, the International Growth Centre, to really now look at how we can bring the map to that true value of understanding that challenge of that informal settlement piece in Lusaka. So starting to analyse the data, starting to look at the position of the individual buildings in the informal settlements, where the water drinking points are, where the sanitation points are, where the health facilities are. And so we'll be working with mapping specialists in those departments in the Zambian government to now analyse this data and put it to work. You know, now the next job is to really put this data to work to help the Zambian government make those best decisions about where those key public health facilities are required and those key public services are required moving forward.
So, I mean, if you were to come into somewhere like Lagos, Nigeria, which has a massive population of around 20 million people, lots of urban slums as well, how would you go about your work there?
So we would probably sort of look at a similar process, Charles. So we would look to see what existing data existed in Lagos. So is there any aerial imagery that we can use? So aerial imagery taken from aircraft. There is satellite data we can use, and then what we would work with the Nigerian government to look at the particular drivers they might have. So again, it might be that informal settlement piece, but we would work with the government to understand what priorities they would like to try and solve. And then we could put our machines to work. So our state-of-the-art artificial intelligence machines could then take that imagery and start to create that very detailed digital map for the city of Lagos in the same way, and then start to look at some of those gaps in infrastructure that may exist, and then help city planners to actually understand where those gaps are and put them into place. So, as I said earlier, you know, we're looking for country partners, city partners to apply this technology to, and we'd be delighted to work with any government that would come to talk to us.
And I mean, what would be the challenges? Could it all sort of go belly up as a result of those challenges? Or are you pretty confident that it's all going to be on track if you were to come into a pretty fragile city?
I mean, one of the benefits of this process is that it can be done pretty much in the office. So, for example, the Zambia project, whilst we had good partnerships on the ground in Lusaka with the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, the majority of the work actually can be done in the office. So a lot of that processing and a lot of that technology is used, as you saw in the film clips there, is done in the office. So actually, from that perspective, it's a really easy process. And especially in these times of COVID, where it's difficult perhaps for people to actually engage on the ground, that's one of the benefits of this process, is that it can be done primarily in the office, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, just to reiterate, because this is a very important point, and by the way, a very important interview, because I mean, what you're saying is absolutely crucial, because African cities are urbanizing rapidly, 4 or 5 times faster than the global rate. And the reason, again, this is particularly important is because of this rapid urbanization, which needs to be solved. I mean, the deleterious effects of it. And so everyone watching your project to see if it's successful and whether it can then be expanded across Africa.
No, absolutely. And I think the other thing I would say is that, we're just part of the bigger solution. I think, we know that there are many honourable people that are trying to solve these problems in those cities. So frontline emergency service workers who have to respond to emergency events, the planners, the people trying to ensure that these cities are able to cope with this mass urban expansion. The map is, albeit an important component, but we're just part of that overall solution. And we're honoured to be working with these countries in that partnership. If we can play a part by providing that data that makes them or enables them to help them make better decisions about this growing infrastructure challenge, then we're very happy to be part of that. But the real, the real heroes and the real folks that are in the spotlight here are the city planners and the folks that are absolutely, building that city infrastructure and making those public services work.
And once you've actually created those maps, what happens then? I mean, you sort of hand it over to them, or do you kind of help to interpret what's on the maps?
So no, Ordnance Survey's ethos, Charles, is that we are very much looking at long-term partnerships. So when we embark on working with countries across the globe, it's all about a long-term partnership of knowledge transfer, capacity building, training, to ensure that we can make sure this is a sustainable program. So what we don't want is this project to sort of stop. We want to ensure that the project continues over time and that the resources in countries sort of take on the job of maintaining the map, working with the map, analysing the map. But of course, Ordnance Survey is very happy to support that initiative in terms of training, helping analysts make sense of the data, helping the resources in the country to actually then become responsible for maintaining that map. We always like to think of a map as being more of a living, breathing database of the real world, so that decision makers have the best possible information at their fingertips. So, in summary, Ordnance Survey is very much looking for longer term partnerships with countries to ensure this is a sustainable solution that will lead to good benefit in the longer term as well.
And briefly, you talked about knowledge transfer and as it were, sort of staying the course. I mean, obviously the big problem that African countries have and city authorities have is that, I think I mentioned this earlier, they don't have the money or the infrastructure to deal with the challenge of urbanization. In that regard, would you, in the process of interpreting the map, say, well, you've got, I don't know, £2 million, don't put the money here, put it there, and we've got about 30 seconds.
So yes, I mean, that's a critical output of this. It means that resources and finances can be directed to where they're needed most. So that's what the map helps to do, and bringing that evidence together means that decision makers to ensure that their money goes to the best possible varieties and the best possible places. So absolutely, that's a key output of this exercise.
Andy Wilson, I want to thank you very much indeed for the time you've taken to talk with us. Very, very interesting chatting with you. And Andy Wilson is the Regional Director of African Ordnance Survey.